Hi there. My name is Dr. Kimberly Ernest. I'm a licensed psychologist, licensed professional counselor, and today on the How to Be Happy Hour, we are going to be talking about romantic relationships and all the different ways it takes us closer to and further away from our quest for happiness.
I'm Cora Lively. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
I'm Cece Hines. I have a bachelor's in psychology. I've been in family based at PCS for 3 years now, and I have been in a romantic relationship with my partner for 5 years, getting married in October. Oh, thank you.
I'm Kristen Wortlift. I'm a certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, a certified recovery specialist supervisor, and a certified family recovery specialist. So I work with families that are experiencing addiction within the family system. And I have been a widow for coming on 3 years now.
Well, thank you all for joining me here today and unpacking what is arguably or at times one of the most important relationships that we have within our existence, and yet something that seems to so often take us away from our quest for happiness, right? Like when it's good, it's great, and when it's not good, it's really not good. And so I know one of the things that I was hoping to talk about here today is how our relationships overlap with our own recovery journeys. So whether it be recovery from substance use, whether it be recovery from mental health, I think in my own family system, recovery from grief was a part of our story and our story as a couple. I've been this year I will be married to my husband, I think, for 14 years. I'm pretty sure. I think it's 14 this year. It is. Yes, it's 14 years this year. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And then also, like, there have been moments in our journey as a couple that have been really high highs, and we've also had some really low lows. And I don't know. I think part of the conversation here today is I'm really hoping to talk about how your partner can be a part of that journey, and then also how that can sometimes get in the way of that journey. So I don't know, is there a place that feels good to start for anyone, or should we just kind of dive into it?
Let's dive in.
Let's get in there.
Get in it. So I guess, Kristen, I know that you've worked so often with couples and family systems in early stage recovery from substance use disorder. And if you were to say, one thing for the loved one of somebody navigating the disease of addiction in that early recovery season, what would you say is like the secret sauce, or what can they do to create an environment more conducive to recovery?
Get your own therapy. Loving someone that struggles with the disease of addiction is not a walk in the park. And you may have gone through a lot of betrayal or trauma or different experiences with that. And so it's not the person in recovery's responsibility to fix that. They can only work on themselves, and that is a big enough job. So I think putting extra pressure onto someone who is trying to recover, that is only going to impede their process. And so it is important to do your own work, especially addressing codependency and recognizing that there is a very fine line between enabling and not, and understanding what that actually looks like, and knowing about what addiction is, and also the correlation between addiction and mental health and how that can affect a relationship. But just doing your own work and getting your own support.
You talk about that line between codependency and support, and I think that's a really fine line to tread, right? I've done a lot of couples therapy with individuals who were incarcerated or in some sort of institution as a part of their community reentry. And I remember when I started doing that, and this would have been like in the mid 2000s, like 2007, 2009 area. It was really not a popular treatment modality for addiction. Addiction was, during that season, very much conceptualized as this is an individual recovery process. The only way, like, that's when oh gosh, what was the Intervention was really popular, where I sit you down and I tell you, if you don't make all these changes,
Yeah.
I will abandon you. And
Yes.
I threaten your most important attachments. And then I'm like, why aren't you responding well to this?
Why'd you walk out and go get high?
And yeah, why when I threaten everything that's important to you, you don't just listen or respond? And I remember early on saying, like, I think we need to do more couples work here. I think we need to do more family work, and getting a lot of criticism for it. Sort of saying, like, no, they need to get right first, and then you work on the recovery piece. But I don't know how you get right in a vacuum. I mean, we're talking about addiction, but I think the same would be true for mental health. I think the same is true navigating like legal challenges or some of those different pieces. How do we support a loved one in continuing to love somebody sort of in the throes of addiction, while not, or the throes of pretty significant mental health, or in the throes of, fill in the blank, while also protecting themselves and guarding their heart? And I've never figured it out. So I guess that's more of a rhetorical question. How do we support them in balancing their needs as well as the needs of the person in recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the support part is so vital, because when you're in it and you're going through it, it feels very isolating. And so just having someone to know like you're not alone and they can help you reframe your thoughts and like stick to reality about the situation. I think the support by itself is just instrumental, because it's such a different process for everybody, like especially depending what it is. If your partner is struggling with grief, or they're struggling with trauma, or they're struggling with addiction, or, bipolar disorder, or whatever it is, I think the support looks very different for all of that. But the key thing is just that having a support system so that you're not isolated with the problem.
When we think, but it's so hard to find.
Yes.
And I feel like there's always, like, when I've worked with couples in that season, there's usually like the individual that's used, typically, but not all. I mean, sometimes both members of the dyad are struggling with addiction or struggling with similar things. And so there's one person that is sort of your IP and is seen as the bad guy. Like, you have the villain, because, thank you, Sackler family, but we've demonized the disease of addiction. We see it as a moral challenge instead of a disease or an illness or a sickness. We make it an issue of morality. And then, so you have like the victim and the perpetrator, and you tell the victim, like, get out, run, save yourself. And so I know that we can support that person, but then I also notice that in at least many of the families I've worked with, that person becomes increasingly more isolated because the feedback they're given is like, stand up for yourself and cut them off and do this and do that. And maybe all that is true, right? Like, codependency is a very serious concern as well, and we don't want that to be there, but just cutting off your partner or the person you love is probably not the path. We've got a lot of other challenges that we'll see in that same light. So maybe it's not substance use, but I think before we started recording, we talked about like pornography, or mental health, and I know both of you have worked with different family systems at different times where you've got two parents and it's not your job to do couples therapy and family based, right? But you do a little bit of couples therapy and family based, because if the couple is in turmoil or conflict, that is going to show up as a symptom with the kiddos. How do you keep the conversation systemic and don't lean into like that villain versus victim narrative and sort of create that self-sustaining dynamic?
I think I would say I'm still trying to figure that out. Because a lot of the reframing is, how do the behaviors, or how does the relationship impact the child? And so, like, when you have substance abuse or mental illness, and it's very prevalent in the caregiver system, that then translates into the child, and a lot of the times the child reacts because of that. Like they, I always tell families, which I don't know if this is a good metaphor or not, but I always tell families that kids are like dogs. They can
Hmm.
smell things, they can smell
Hmm.
fear and sadness and grief, and so a lot of times when families or caregivers feel like their kids don't know what's going on, they really do, and they
Hmm.
respond to that. And so trying to like bring their awareness to like, hey, you need to like take care of yourself and focus on this thing, so that your kid can function and thrive the way they need to. Ooh, I said it. I meant they need to. Thinking of the dog metaphor
Yeah,
still.
right.
No, I agree. And I think, I don't know, I come from a family system where I really, I mean, I like to think I think systemically. I like to think I understand that my relationship with my husband will impact our kiddos. And um, I know that I mean, my husband and I'm fortunate in that I like him still like 90% of the time. Like 90% of the time, I really genuinely like him. And then there is that 10%. But during that 10%, like we notice it in our kids. Like if it always happens on vacation, right? Like we never talk about that, but everyone's always like, no, you go on vacation, you have these magical family moments. You also have like high pressure situations. You're parenting in a different place. We often travel with like extended family or go to see my husband's family's in Texas, so we go to see extended family. And so there's a lot of other demands. And arrival day, my husband and I are always chippy with each other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much we commit to not being. We are. And I could tell you it today, and we'll do it the next time we travel. And yet you watch the symptoms start emerging in our kids, like our conflict. And even though we think we've got it buttoned up, right? Like we don't display it to the kids, like they know, and they start fighting, or they start, like my youngest will use like baby voices, or like you start to see it show up. And we know better, and yet we still don't do better anytime. And so it's difficult to really recognize how the romantic relationship dynamics will play out across the rest of the family system.
You were making me think of something I saw on Facebook, I think. It was like a while ago, but like it was about like psychology students. They were joking and saying well, like, why are you depressed? Like, just look at your notes. It's hard to look at your notes, like, because like I don't have kids. I have a dog, but like just the way that we interact, like I can tell, and with my dog too, like when me and my fiance are affectionate and she like tries to jump on us and be affectionate, but like if we're arguing or like tense and she's like, what is the vibe?
Does she
Like I
run like
don't.
back and forth between you
She just
guys?
kind of like I don't even know what her face is. She just like chews her toy, but she's also like,
Side-eyeing you.
like,
Yeah.
like this toy is like satisfying me, but like I'm watching y'all. I know.
I don't trust this.
I don't. Yeah, something's fishy.
No, they definitely can pick up on it. And I think they also, I mean, maybe not for the dog, but for like children involved in a family system, that's going to be their prototype. Like that's what they look to for relationships. And I can remember, I was fortunate that I moved away, and I started my relationship with my husband 2,000 miles away from my family system. So it was nice to have that distance and that perspective to really write our own story and our own narrative. But I mean, we often talk about like our kids are going to grow up and this is going to be their example for how relationships work. And I think for the most part, we set a pretty good one. But every once in a while, man, you wish you'd have that do-over button. And I don't know. I just think our kids are watching and learning these different things. Maybe your dog is going to grow up and have similar relationship dynamics with their future partner, right? I don't know, but I think it's important, and we don't recognize that as much, or we think that nobody can pick up on it or sense it.
And it depends on how open families are with that too, because like in my family of origin, like humor is really important.
Yes.
So like my mom and my dad, they were best friends before they got married, and so like growing up, I've only really seen humor. I've not really seen like vulnerability or like how to deal with things when like there's depression, there's grief, there's anxiety, there's substance abuse, even really conflict that like when I've only seen my parents argue like maybe 5 times in my entire life. And so then when you go into your own relationship, like, yeah, that's a model, and you conceptualize it as healthy or unhealthy or however, like whatever labels you want to attach it to, but then you're like, you do the hard stuff and you're like, whoa, like I didn't even think about this. And so sometimes I bring that up to my mom. It's just like, not that I wanted you guys to like fist fight in front of each other or like have these really intense arguments, but like it's important for kids to also be able to see like mom and dad argue and then they resolve and then they come back together and they're vulnerable, but they come back and they know how to connect and that sort of thing. 'Cause like sometimes like when you don't see it, then it's like, how do you do it?
Yeah, or you get the false impression that good relationships are easy, and that they don't take work, but they do absolutely take work, and it's not always rainbows and sunshine, you know? So, yeah, learning how to deal with conflict and things like that is an important part of modeling healthy relationships.
Oh, I agree. And I think if you're choosing, especially if your lifestyle is that of like a monogamous long-term partner, man, there's going to be great days and then there's going to be shit days and then the really really bad ones too, and you can't always predict or see them coming. And I'm curious about the Cece, what you said about learning how to argue or learning how to disagree. And it's been amazing the number of times that has been the work in couples therapy. And so like, how do we support people in fighting well?
Yeah.
And actually fighting, because I think like it's often bimodal, right? Like when we're working with these family systems, we have like the embattled explosive family system, and we're really trying to like turn down the volume and get them to regulate and be more effective. And then we also have like the closed off, stonewalling, completely disconnected family system where nothing's here. There's no problems. But they're absent. They're distant from each other. And I think that one, it can be more insidious. At times, I think that's the one that people are like, well, we never fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's cool. But you also don't talk to each other. You're roommates. That,
Right.
that ships that pass in the night, if we're a Barry Manilow fan. So I don't know, how do we support people in fighting well or developing ground rules for how couples and dyads can fight with each other effectively?
I think even doing individual work, I still am so systemic with things. Like, I want to know your timeline. I want to know your family system. I want to know how your mom and dad were raised and how your grandparents were raised. And I think when you explore with couples the role that they were in growing up. So like, let's say you have 2 oldest children get together. Parents were a nightmare. You kind of had to be a caregiver. You took care of everything. Sometimes when you put those 2 people together, conflict is healthy, and then other times it's not. So I think also just kind of understanding where somebody came from, the way their family handled conflict, and start from there.
And that alone is I'm just thinking about my own family. I was raised by 2 psychologists.
Yeah.
You talk about your feelings in this house, right? My husband was raised by a radio GM, general manager. You don't talk about talk about music. You talk about fun.
Stuff.
Yeah, and his family system also had some addiction pretty well characterized in there, whereas my family didn't. Food addiction maybe, but not substance addiction. And it was just when we first got together, we embodied the pursuer distancer dynamic. And I was always like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk. He's like, you leave me to the fuck alone. And that was just the dynamic. And we figured out a different path, but it was through couples therapy, premarital therapy, and then couples therapy. And then a couple years later, when we went through some shit, some more couples therapy. And so I don't know, how do we support? I think the answer truly is go to therapy, because that's always the answer. Spoiler alert. Always the answer. But how do we support, or how can couples that aren't willing to do therapy or maybe don't see that as their next step, how do we support them in developing rules for fighting well, or identifying what their narrative or their story is going to be when it comes to conflict?
I think it starts with defining conflict, Because especially if you have a lot of trauma, your perception of conflict is negative.
Yeah.
Like it has to be a knockdown, drag out, like battle. Like it can't just be two people with different perceptions and worldviews coming together to reach a solution. So I think understanding first what conflict means, and then also looking at what does anger mean for you, because there is such a negative connotation around the emotion of anger, and just understanding like what, just because you don't punch holes in the wall, right, like doesn't mean that you don't have anger, and understanding what it looks like to take anger out on yourself, because that's not as common as external anger. We pay a lot of attention to external anger, but the person that's like not eating well and not going to the doctor and not going to sleep and living off of 17 coffees and monsters all day, like that person's
targeting.
Yeah, I'm also targeted by that, if it makes you feel any better. But like that is like self-neglect, and that comes from internal anger and resentments and things like that. So like how does that show up in your relationship, and how can you learn to process your own anger? Because oftentimes that doesn't come from this relationship. It could, but it often comes from stuff that happened before you entered into this situation. So that will show up and impact that relationship if you're not dealing with the things that have caused you resentments from the past. So yeah, understanding anger and conflict and what those are even at the end of the day. Like how is that defined by you? And a big thing that we teach, like in Seeking Safety in the group that I run, is that like right and wrong does not need to be the focus, because to anybody's life, their perception, their worldview, we can argue all day about being right. So instead, focusing more on like accepting each other's points of view and then coming together to just figure out a solution and work as a team instead of trying to be right. So I think those are all just things that have been helpful over the years.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I've had to navigate with my fiance. Just like, because his past relationship was like not the super healthiest. And when we got together, there was a lot of still like healing he had to do from that relationship. And so like when we would argue or if there was conflict, I'm usually go with the flow, pretty laid back. But if I would get upset about something, like he would have this like, oh, like he was used to the big reaction of just like, I'm going to leave, or I'm going to like cuss you out, or I'm not going to treat you well, or something like that. And so like having to navigate that too has just been like, what are you used to? Because I am not going to do that. And then how do you intentionally do something different? It doesn't always feel good when you do something different. And sometimes you don't really have that security in the difference of just being like, I don't really know if I'm doing this right, or it doesn't always feel right. But having to push through, I feel like that has really, really helped us. And even reminding him too, like, I'm not her. And he's had to, like, I'm sure he's had to do that with me with other things as well. So and that goes back to the support you were talking about earlier too, just having, like, helping your partner kind of differentiate, like, what the different parts of them that they are experiencing and how that's coming into the relationship. And how you're, like, the different parts that you're experiencing and how you're bringing that to the relationship.
I also think if nobody knows what the autonomic nervous system is, look it up. Polyvagal
100%.
theory, there's an 8.5-minute video on YouTube that I love. But
Do that.
I think like the more people know about...
We'll link it at the end.
Yes, right? The more people know about themselves and like the immobilized versus immobilized, even when you're in feel-good states, if you're so used to having that trauma response, anxiety, stress, your body's not functioning the way it should. And that can also explain why you react a certain way.
Or that the only time someone loves you is when you're in that space.
Yes.
Like you only love me if you're smashing my windows out of my car.
Yeah.
Like if that's someone's experience, and like you're like, no, like we're just having a conflict, it's fine. Like they might take that as, oh, well then you don't really love me because you're not lashing out and
Fighting for this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, like you don't have to be there in every situation, but if you are there and you notice that's the only time you feel supported, follow the link.
Like, you make me think of this this funny story. Me and my fiance were driving in the car. My best friend was on the phone, and I don't know how we got on this topic, but he was talking about his past relationship and how it was so much different, so much healthier, and so much more positive. And I look over to him, and I'm like, "Oh, is that not what you want? Do you want me to be toxic?" And he's like, no. And I'm like, and I'm driving. I'm like, out, because I can just like crash this car right now. And I start like fishtailing.
Let me
He's
show
like,
you
right into
how
the
much I
median.
love
He's
you.
like, if this is what I'll be, whatever you want, baby. Like, I'm driving the car crazy, and he's like, no, 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 no. And my best friend's like, she's like, because we've been friends since kindergarten, and she's like over my shit. She's like, calm down. I'm like, okay.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
I'm like, if that's what you want, I'll do it. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like, trust me, that's not what I want. But that was what he was used to.
Yeah.
So like trying to do things different. Like sometimes there's that panic of like things will go back to like what I know or what I've had before. And so like having to slow each other down is hard but helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I think we seek out what's familiar, right? Like we look at what makes sense. And I don't know, I'm thinking about even like early childhood attachment, how some of those different experiences. And I think we talk a lot about those things. But even recently, like, all right, I love stupid reality television. I will own that. If I could have any job in the world, it would be working with those folks after the fact, because I actually think reality television does a lot of damage, despite the fact I continue to support it. But like I was watching the most recent season of Love is Blind, and I'm watching this one couple talk through a wall. First of all, Love is Blind. I will come work for you, and I will support these folks along the way because they need some help.
Yes.
They need some help, and I'd be happy to come assist in filming the next season. But other than that, I'm watching them talk about attachment theory through the wall, and I'm watching like this guy say, "Oh, you have an avoidant attachment style," and he's like, "Well, I have an anxious attachment style, and I'm not sure that we're going to work out." And da, 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 da. And it's like, first of all, there's so much media attention on like attachment theory, and then we take it and we bastardize it, and the part that gets missed along the way is that our attachment patterns will evolve over the course of our lifespan based upon the relationships that we have around us. And so if we can start with the most fucked attachment patterns and styles, and if we can get into a healthy, consistent relationship, we can heal the parts of ourselves. We can work on our autonomic nervous system and learn how to soothe. Our partners can work with us to soothe differently and develop more effective patterns and build more effective neural pathways. But just in watching this Love is Blind clip and just thinking like, wow, that is such a deterministic view on attachment. And it's so much more hopeful than that. And yet somehow it gets kind of lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. Well, and I tell families too that when they get hooked on the labels, like my kid has reactive attachment, or my kid has borderline, or my kid has bipolar, really like the label is helpful, but it's data, right? Like it doesn't define what happens
your
afterwards.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So like, and it stems from a lot of like traumatic experiences and insecure attachment, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stay like that forever. And I think sometimes people have, I don't want to say like a warped view, but they're so stuck in it that they don't know that like there is like, they're so used to there not being a light at the end of the tunnel. And then when we come in and they're like, no, actually like the light's right there. They're like, like, no, question mark.
I see no light.
They're like, are you gaslighting me? I'm like, no, it's like literally right there.
Do not get me started on gaslighting. Oh my goodness. That is one psychological term that I wish we could take firmly back and be like, no, y'all, people just disagree with you. That's not gaslighting. People are allowed to see the world differently and they're not gaslighting.
Yeah. And not everybody's narcissistic.
Not everyone's narcissistic.
Thank you.
Or bipolar.
Not everyone's
That's
narcissistic. Not everyone's bipolar.
When people are, I was like, if someone is bipolar, it just like it is destructive of their life. Like it's not.
They're
a
not just
trend.
moody.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
cute. It's not because you had some mood swings. Like, watch somebody in a full manic episode. Like it's not just like a cute little TikTok trend. I promise.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't
I
actually look
promise.
like that.
You're
Yeah.
also probably not autistic.
Yeah.
But
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's the new one.
That's a whole new TED Talk.
that's a whole
That's-
different
yeah, that's a whole-
podcast,
we'll be
which
back
would
next
be a great
week.
one, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so we'll have to come back. for that particular topic. But I do. I mean, and I think I do worry to some degree about like some of these TikTok trends or some of these different definitions of relationships, and the long term impact of that, like the swipe culture and the really short attention spans. And it's an old book, but it's a great one. It's called The Anatomy of Love by Helen Fisher. And I was thinking about it when you were talking about smashing out windows, because she talks about that. She talks about like PEA and the neurochemical that is produced in your brain for the first 2 years of a relationship. And then it stops being produced with the same amount. You don't get near as much, but that's why in early relationships, people act like they're high, because they are. They're high on their own neurological supply, I suppose. And then when that drops off and gets replaced by oxytocin, like the cuddle hormone or the companion hormone, they get confused and they're like, well, he's no longer standing outside my window with a boombox. Like, there's no longer these grand gestures. I must not be in love with them anymore. And it's like, no, that's just what happens to the brain. And my fear is with really short attention spans and swipe right culture and people not sticking with a relationship when it gets difficult, we're going to become increasingly more isolated, not just romantically, but systemically, but romantically for today.
And I feel like it's dysfunctional in a way, again, like with the conflict. Like, you have to learn how to, like, increase your distress tolerance for certain things that you don't like. Like, you can't just, like, oh, well, he didn't text me back, bye. Like, well, he might be working. Like, there's other factors that come into play. Like, nobody's attached to their phone 24/7 now. I think of that, like, with teenagers, like, when they cycle through their little boyfriends and girlfriends, they're like this one kid, I felt like they had a different boyfriend like every other week, and I'm like, and they're like, did I tell you about so and so? And I'm like, was that the one who had this going on, or is this a different one? They're like, no, he's got this going on. I'm like, I can't keep track with you anymore. Like, what's going on with this one now?
I'm gonna need a whiteboard.
Like, I have to keep a list of all your partners, and it's usually something so minimal. Like the kids nowadays are like the texting or the calling, or like, I called him and he didn't respond, so now I'm over it. It's like,
I think
he
that
could call you back.
I think that's like another trend though. Like we were talking about, like it's all over social media of like the expectations you're supposed to have and you shouldn't be putting up with stuff, and like it doesn't give any grace to the fact that like back in my day, you had to like call somebody's house, talk to their parents,
make
and
up
then
a lie.
ask ask to speak to them. So it's like they didn't have a phone in their pocket 24/7 to be able, like, it took effort to actually communicate with people. And just because someone's available and they can text doesn't mean they should. Like, we also have the mental capacity of, just because we have access to that all the time, we're not always available. And I think because we just we do, and we're not always in the right mental state to be doing. And that creates even more conflict because it's over like technology. It's not in person. You're not like sitting across from somebody, feeling their vibes, recognizing their tone. When you text each other and you don't know the tone, you don't understand where the other person's coming from, that is just like a whole other level of stuff that comes up then. So like, just because someone can respond to you, I think it's important also respect where they're at. Like, are they in a place that they can respond? If I just did trauma therapy for 10 hours that day, you don't want me to respond to your text message. You want me to just eat my ice cream and watch Rick and Morty. You don't want me to talk to you about your problems. I promise. I am depleted at that point. But just because someone can text me, they will, and that doesn't mean that I hate them because I don't respond. But I think that has become part of like the whole trendy stuff. Yeah. If he doesn't respond in X amount of hours, you should break up with him.
Well, and that's the same with friends too. Like, I often see a lot of like TikToks or Facebook posts about like the low maintenance friend. It's just like, my friends know that like I don't have to text them every day and I don't owe you anything. And it's like, yeah, Also, it's a common courtesy to just like eventually, like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
just die on that person and like don't give them an explanation. And I think that
Yeah.
gets confused even in relationships too. Like, um, I had said this a while ago. Like, if you didn't foster and put in the same amount of energy and effort into any relationship, like you wouldn't be able to grow or develop. Like, and I think people forget that too. Like professional relationships,
Yeah.
coworkers, friendships, romantic relationships, kids. If you just like never talk to that person or never interact with that person or just think that, oh, like I don't owe that person anything. I don't have to give you this effort. I don't have to give you like I don't have to tell you what's going on. Like how do you then you be like you force yourself to be more isolated. Like you don't you're not connecting in the way that you probably should be. And like how that feels normal to you, I just don't know.
Yeah.
Like maybe that is more of their like attachment style and like their stuff that they've experienced. But I've often got on that soapbox of just like you can't just not put effort into your relationship and think it's just gonna like grow into this big beautiful thing.
Every relationship takes work, whether it be a romantic relationship, whether it be a friendship, a workplace, a supervisory, a therapeutic relationship. Like there are going to be moments, and I think that conflict is a necessary part of all healthy relationships. Now, not all conflict is healthy.
Yes.
Not all conflict is healthy. There are times where conflict is expressed in a dangerous, painful, or unhealthy way. But the absence, the complete absence of conflict is not indicative of a healthy relationship either. And I think so often it's the conflict that leads to the ghosting, or it's the conflict that leads to another term that I heard recently that kids these days, man, they're just words. They're just making up fucking words. Orbiting.
Oh yeah.
So it's when you ghost someone, but I still interact with your social media, sending you mixed messages. So
Okay.
I won't talk to you, I won't call you, I won't hang. Well, I guess nobody calls anyone. I won't hang out with you though, but I'll still like and comment, and so I stay present with you, but absent from you. And I mean,
Sounds like a personality disorder.
Manipulation for sure.
Yeah.
doesn't it sound like? Well, but
little wild,
it sounds very ambivalent attachment to me, like some really strong "come here, go away" vibes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I want to keep you near, but not any closer than there. Like, just stay.
And doesn't it
there.
kind of
Yeah.
say like I want you to do something? At least to
Yeah.
me, it feels like it. I don't know it.
Like negative attention seeking?
Yes, negative attention
Yeah.
seeking.
I'm gonna like your post, but I'm not gonna respond to your text message.
Yes, it feels evil.
Super villain.
It feels narcissistic and gaslighting.
Yeah, totally narcissistic.
Definitely. But I think I don't know. It just feels like there's different layers of these more toxic. I mean, how many posts are on TikTok and Instagram and whatever that we see about like red flags and green flags, and I always watch them. Like, so obviously my algorithm.
The flag.
I love him.
Yes.
That's the only one I approve of.
Yeah, I love
He's the only one that's ever right.
Yes.
Yes.
There are other ones that I'm like, that flag might seem green to you, but sure looks red from my perspective. Like, and I think I had one client years ago that had tremendous trauma growing up, and then tremendous trauma in her adult relationship. Like, because, trauma begets trauma sometimes. And she had a lot of really traumatic adult relationships as well. And as we're unpacking those different things, she just said, Kim, I'm colorblind when it comes to flags. Like, I see a red flag and I think it's green. And she's like, I think you're telling me you love me. And we ended up with, she decided, I don't know if we have Seinfeld fans in the room, but she decided, like, the episode where George Costanza decides he's going to do the opposite of every instinct and impulse he's ever had.
Oh, that's so smart.
And she's like, it's opposite day evermore. And the last I spoke with her, because she had reached out to me for her records, not that long ago. And she's like, yeah, I just want you to know I'm in a really healthy relationship now. And like, I think the flags really are green this time, and yada, yada, yada. And so nice, obviously, when you get those pieces. But I think it's also learning to not trust your gut all the time. Like, I think we need to learn to trust ourselves in certain ways, but I think we also need to recognize that our traumatic experiences change our relationships with safety, change our perceptions of coercion, change our perceptions of connection and what a healthy relationship looks like, and having a healthy skepticism of our own beliefs and recognizing just because we think something doesn't mean it is. And sometimes we should look deeper into that. And so that's where I think therapy can really be helpful. And I think that's really hard to do on your own. Like if left unsupervised with my own thoughts, it's very difficult for me to explore them in a way that is helpful to me.
Especially when you do have like the trauma reaction and your neurological system is involved and things like that. Like it's taking your brain to a different place. So it's hard to, without training to like bring that back and know what's going on up there and, all of that stuff. And so, just talking to someone can help understand the difference between trusting your gut instinct and recognizing when, trauma or other life experiences have kind of warped that or taken it away completely. Because I work with some women who just can't believe anything they think. They have zero trust in themselves because of ongoing long-term domestic abuse. So like their whole reality has been completely shifted. And so it's hard for them to even know what their instinct is, like what their instinct's telling them, let alone like trusting it and being able to differentiate between this is instinct and this is my trauma creating a scenario in my mind.
Oh, trippy.
And I think you can heal from that.
Oh, 100%.
I think you can heal from that. I think you heal from that in your own work. And then at a certain point, I love to see individuals go from individual treatment into couples therapy because I also think, different ages and stages and seasons is going to stir stuff up differently. Like I have dealt with the same 5 shitty issues since since for as long as I can remember. And each like I struggle with anger. I love anger. I love it. It's anesthetizing.
So safe.
It's safe. It self-righteous indignation. Oh, it's my favorite on the anger scale. That I can wrap myself up in it like a warm blanket. It numbs me out. It becomes your fault, not mine. Love it. Love everything about it. I've had to deal with it over the course of my entire life in important relationships. It looks different in different relationships, like in friendships versus professional relationships versus my relationships with my kids versus my relationship with my parents. It looks different and it gets me every fucking time. Like every time I'm like, I've got you. And like, no. It like just sneaks around the corner and it's like, you again, like foiled again. It just shows up in different ways in different stages. And so I think like, to work through your trauma individually, to work through it as it relates to your disease of addiction or your behavioral addictions or any of your maladaptive coping, to how it impacts your nervous system, but then to come in and do like maybe some emotion-focused couples therapy, like something that has a strong attachment and trauma base and recognizes that when we love people, we trigger people. And that if I love you the most, with my husband, he brings out the best in me and there are times he brings out the worst in me and vice versa. Like we're going to tap into each other's shit.
Yeah.
And finding a way to like honor and recognize that and navigate it in a healthy and safe way. To me, that's the secret sauce of a marriage. It's not any of the other pieces. It's not the PEA it's figuring out a way to comfort and show up for each other even when our own shit is activated.
Well, when kids feel safest with you, like that, you hear like, oh, my kid's an angel at school, but at home they act like a psychopath, because it feels safe to show you all their sides. And like that comes up in relationships too. Like when you've been with someone and you know that they're there and that they are reliable and, trustworthy and stuff, you can tend to show them the worst sides of you. It comes out because it is a safe place. And that can cause damage. So, just realizing, yes, it's a safe place, but also it's not your partner's responsibility to like treat that. Like, you have to actually do work, because just because it's safe doesn't mean that it's healthy. And you want to recognize those things, like whether it's anger, whether it's trust issues, whether it's control issues, whatever it is that keeps rearing its ugly head, doing that work individually. Because it building up, doing that over and over and over again without change is going to cause like ruptures in the relationship at some point.
I kind of want to stem on the opposite end, the relationships that are long term and you love and care about the person so much that the two of you together, like you can't heal yourselves.
Yeah.
And so you have to break away, even though
Yeah.
it feels like someone rips your heart out type of feeling.
I think that I've seen that in a therapeutic sense more often than not. I've done a lot of couples therapy over the years. And I'm always pretty open to what direction we're going. Like, are we working towards reunification? Are we working towards divorce? Is it my job to help you end things well and protect the kids? Like, what is our role together? And so I enter into any couples therapy work pretty open to where we're going and allow the couple to guide me to where we're going. And I have seen couples essentially say, like, we just can't figure out a healthy pattern. I've seen it a lot with addiction, especially if both members of the dyad struggle with their own addiction. That always, because I've worked in addiction so everyone meets their boyfriend or girlfriend in rehab.
Terrible idea.
It's not that
Don't do that, please.
Trauma bonding.
Yes. do not in rehab. And I've seen it work, I think, twice over the course of my career. And then most of the time I've seen it not work. And they relapse together, or it's just heartbreaking. And there are times where our relationships really aren't long-term healthy for us, or we're not going to be able to heal in the context of one another. And I've seen, I worked with one couple that actually, I worked with them as they got divorced. And then they called me 2 years later and said, hey, we're getting back together again. Can you help us with that too? And I'm like, I guess so. That was a new one. I had not done that, but I helped them end well. They both did their own therapy after we ended because they fought over who got me as their therapist. And I said, neither. You both, I'm sorry, I can't play favorites. Sometimes if just one wants to stay in therapy, I'll do that, but not when they both want. I can't treat you both, so I'll treat neither of you. But then they called me later, and I had known they'd continued to go to the practice I was at and did their own therapy individually. And then they said, all right, now we want you to come back and help us come back together again. And it's like, oh shit. Like, so sometimes I know that's also part of the story, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal experience, if I didn't walk away from the relationship, like neither of us would have gotten better. And thank goodness we did, because that was like the final thing for her to actually get sober. Like, if I stayed with her, she would have been dead. Yeah. Like, that would have been it. There was nobody in her life telling her no. Nobody. So I had to be the one to say no, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, I literally will never forget that day where I was like, you know what? If you were dead right now, it would cause both of us less pain. And that's like a really, really shitty place. I'm so sorry. But it was just really, really challenging to make that decision. But thank goodness I did, because it led to probably the 3 best years of my life before that bitch cancer came into the picture. So, but that decision to end the relationship is ultimately what saved our relationship. But it was not easy. That is for sure. It was very, very not easy.
I think that's a dynamic that a lot of couples really struggle with, though. Like, how do I love you and set a boundary with you? And I also think your story's unique in a lot of ways. Like, I've seen, I can think of in my own family system, I think that my mother-in-law and father-in-law divorced because of his addiction. And I know that they loved each other fiercely until he died, but he never found recovery for any sustainable period of time. But I'm certain if he had, they would have gotten back together again. Like, I'm certain of that. And yet it wasn't. it wasn't in the cards for that story. And so I think it's beautiful that that was a
Yeah. I
part of your
mean,
story.
when we did get back together, though, my God, the work we had to do, like, it was wild. And even me being in this field, like, that's not what I couldn't do that. Like, you have to go deal with your shit over there, and I have to deal with mine over here.
Well, you
And
couldn't be her therapist.
no, or just even her accountability partner. Like, I was like traumatized by her addiction. Like, it
Yeah.
was some of the hardest parts of my life. So I can't do that with you. Like, that has to be you and your therapist, you and your sponsor, like you and your people. You do that. And I'm just going to be your wife. That's it. That's all I can be. And I really had to separate myself from that very early on because I came from controlling, micromanage, anxious attachment. And we both had trauma before the relationship and then a 10-year heroin addiction, you know? So it's like, I say heroin, but it literally anything under the sun was up for grabs. So it was very, very difficult addiction to maneuver. And the only thing I knew about addiction at that point was prison, like my experience with it in
You were a
prison.
CO.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot.
So that's the only thing that I knew was like watching people detox in their cell, which was also traumatizing.
Oh gosh.
So like that what I thought I knew then, I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. So I got a crash course in addiction while getting my master's degree in addiction. So that was fun. But yeah, like it basically, if we would not have done our individual work, even after coming back together, it would not have survived. That relationship would not have survived. And it almost didn't. I mean, like, I will never forget one time she was like, you know what? If you don't let the past go even a little bit, I'm never going to get better. And she hung up on me. And I will never forget that day because I'm like, she's right though. Like, she's right though. And I had to really look at that and be like, I'm trying to live in the past still, constantly every single day, and I'm not noticing any of the progress being made in front
That's a
of me.
trauma response.
Exactly.
Like that's a trauma response is
Yep.
to stay hyper vigilant and everything reminds you of that other thing and it
Yep.
keeps even though it's not happening right now in this moment, it's a trigger that reminds you of a different day, of a different time, of a different season with different thoughts and feelings and emotions all tied together.
And is it going to happen again?
And is it going to happen
Yeah.
again?
Am I going to get that phone call again? Like, you know, am I going to be back there again? Like, it's terrifying. It's a risk, you know? And is the love that you have with that person worth the risk of getting hurt again? You know, that's the vulnerability that you take when you enter into an intimate relationship.
And I think that's the $1 million question when we're working with couples, because I mean, couples never come into therapy because things are going well. Every once in a while, I've gotten the privilege of doing premarital therapy, and even then, it's not going well.
Yeah.
But when you are working with a dyad, oftentimes there is some sort of significant rupture. Is it addiction? Is it an affair? Is it porn? Is it, fill in the blank? There's usually some circumstance that has been traumatic because it is your primary attachment figure. That is your person. That is your human. And I remember Sue Johnson describing like ruptures or distance in those relationships. Like it's not just distressing, it's primal. Like it's survival. It's you are my lifeline to this world because we are flock animals. I always say it. We're just big, less feathered chickens. We are flock animals and you're my flock. And if that connection is threatened, that's terrifying and it's going to be traumatic. And your wife was correct in that, man, if we can't to some degree move forward from this, realizing that there will be future triggers, we'll never be able to move on. We'll never be able to have that safe connection.
Yeah.
And asking a loved one to do that, man. Like,
Yeah.
I've sat with couples in aftermaths of affairs, and they said like the hypervigilance, I'm still gobsmacked that you cannot diagnose PTSD in the aftermath of an affair or PTSD in the aftermath of navigating the disease of addiction with your partner because it looks, smells, and acts just like
Oh,
PTSD.
100%. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I learned in that moment is that I need to trust myself, and that I lost trust in myself while navigating through that relationship because codependency took me there. Codependency took my trust in myself away. So I had to get that back and realize no matter what happens in this situation, I will be okay. Like, I will get through it. I will figure it out. But I can't put my trust issues with myself out there and like not see the progress and not see the changes and not see what's happening, because at the end of the day it was just that I didn't believe that I could trust myself to deal with whatever would happen. And the thing is, I'm really good at picking up when somebody relapses. It's like a sixth sense. So I would know. I would know immediately. And I had to trust myself that I would be able to pick up on stuff like that because I'm really good at it. And you just got to like find yourself again after it's been lost for a while. And I think that was a huge part of healing as well, is just you can't trust anybody else if you don't trust you. And starting there is a really good place when you're trying to heal any kind of rupture in a relationship, because you can't control the other person. They're going to do what they do. But can you control you? Can you control the way that you see your world?
And I think you can conceptualize it systemically, but each member of the dyad has to have their own tasks and responsibilities. Like, I remember working with one couple following an affair, and he was the one who had the affair. She had decided like it was her responsibility to make sure he never did it again. So she checked his phone. She would monitor him on Find a Friend. She would go through all his social media. He had to give her all his but like, he didn't take responsibility for this.
That's exhausting.
That's exhausting.
Full-time job.
It's
Yeah,
a
no,
full-time
thank you.
job, and where there's a will, there's a way, right? And so that was I love that you brought codependency into because that is right up there with narcissism and gaslighting for me in terms of TikTok trends that we could give up at any time, I'm comfortable with. So often I hear people say, oh, well, I'm just codependent. And it's like, no, you just like that person a lot. Like, that's not codependency.
Did
Like,
you buy them heroin so they wouldn't withdraw? Because that's codependency.
let's define
Yeah,
codependency here.
Let's get
for a
real about how
moment.
ugly that actually gets. Yeah.
And how self-sacrificing it is.
Yes.
And
You
how,
lose your whole identity.
but then also how much that harms the relationship long term, because you collect the resentments.
Oh, yeah.
You start holding the responsibility for that person while simultaneously starting to resent and sometimes even despise, loathe, contempt. Like, it all builds over. And then you also take so much responsibility for them.
Like,
Things
they
that are
represent
theirs.
you. Like, they're you. They're an extension of you. So it's like whatever they do, it falls back on me. And there's no separation there of identity at all.
And you hold the floor up for them.
Yeah.
Like, you protect them from the natural consequences of their decisions. And I've worked with a lot of folks that have had a whole host of charges that are not popular charges, or a whole host of behaviors they engaged in while in their disease of addiction that, would make your toes curl. It's just not good stuff, right? It's ugly. It's messy. And I also watch folks hold that floor up and protect them from the consequences of those decisions. And I'm not saying like you rub their face in it, but you have to some degree allow it to occur.
Yeah.
Because people don't make changes. If you avoid the sting of the discomfort of your bad choices, you don't make better choices. You just keep making the bad ones because it's the sting, it's the pain that comes afterwards that evokes the change, not, oh, I noticed that was a bad idea, I will now make a better choice. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was thinking of like the being on the opposite end of it too. Like, for my fiance and his previous relationship, when things kept coming up where he was being reminded of that relationship, I had to tell him to kill her off. And not that I would want him to actually commit murder, but metaphorically, I needed her to die so that he could let that go, because he, like living in the past and that hypervigilance, it's exhausting, but it becomes prevalent in that relationship. And I would be like, it's been 3 years. She's got to die. Like, kill her off.
Yeah.
Like, she's no
Move her
longer
off the
living.
island. Yeah, she's not welcome here.
Well, because whatever the fill in the blank is personifies in that relationship. It's no longer a dyad, it's a triad. It becomes that third person. And because we're holding on to all the stuff that happened in that last relationship, like, she's in this relationship. I'm not dating her. Like, you're not dating her either. So kill her off.
Why is she here?
Excuse her from this space so that we can do what we need to do.
Absolutely.
And I think we also tend to unintentionally recreate those same dynamics, whether it be toxic dynamics from our family of origin, whether it be more challenging relationship dynamics from previous relationships within our own personal narratives, whatever it is, we end up creating an environment that it could be very different, but the processes are still the exact same. Like, the content may be different, but you still have that same process. And it almost it's what keeps us stuck. It's what keeps us stuck in those same patterns, and almost becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, we create, I'm afraid you're going to do this, so I create an environment in which you do this. And it's crazy how we do, and we can see it, especially as professionals. Like, we can see the patterns, and yet we can't change them in our own lives at times, or struggle to.
Can't take our own notes, man.
No, never read our own notes. So I guess one of the questions that was submitted for today that I thought was pretty interesting is, can you think of a client story or a life experience that's taught you a powerful lesson about relationships? And there was, I'll answer that question. Mostly I wanted to ask it because I was like, oh, I have a good answer for it. So I'll answer it and give y'all a moment to think. But I was preparing to get married when I was on internship for my doctorate, and I was at a hospice unit. And I wanted to work on a hospice unit because I really sucked at navigating death and dying and grief. It just was a content area that I knew when it had shown up for me professionally. Like, I just botched it. And so I very intentionally sought out that training experience because I knew it was a growth edge for me. What I didn't expect going into it is the lesson that I was going to have in families and couples therapy. And I remember sitting with the wives of, so I was at the VA, so it was mostly male veterans for the most part, given hospice and just sort of, those different things. And I was sitting with the wives following, we had a grief support group, and listening to the way in which they would describe their husbands and tell their love stories, and how that story continued beyond, like, post-mortem, beyond their death, just the way in which they defined just these beautiful narratives, but not perfect. Like, there was, oh God, he was such a dick on trash day, or like whatever it was, you know what I mean? And one woman would talk about how she still, like, ritualistically on Fridays would make his drink and then pour it down the drain. But she would sit and she would have her, like, old fashioned, and he would have his old fashioned from the great beyond, and then she'd dump his and drink hers, and just continued to honor their relationship in that way. And I remember at the time entering into my own marriage and thinking I found my person, but there's a lot of anxiety in those early days, and you're not sure. At least I wasn't. I'm avoidantly attached. I'm still looking for exit signs, right? I'm still trying to decide, like, am I out? Is this the thing? Do I call it off now?
Walk down the aisle like, you still like me,
Are we
right?
sure?
We're good.
Yeah, like, are you mad at me or am I hungry? My husband will look at me now. He's like, I think you just need a snack.
It's been 14 years. Sit down and eat a Snickers. Yeah.
You don't need to leave. But recognizing just, it was so powerful to me to be like, man, like, it wasn't perfect, but they stuck it out, and it's still beautiful to them. And so for me, that was a really powerful relationship lesson, that I knew it, but to see their love carry on in the absence of them, I don't know, just was really grounding for me to realize that, like, all these different things that I'm like, is that do I run now? Do I take, like, I should leave him before he leaves me, right? For sure. It was just very soothing in that moment, both personally and professionally. So I went in to get better at grief, but what I realized is just so much more than that.
So I have a couple. So I explained that she was in active addiction for a long time. She had overdosed multiple times. One of those was in a Rutter's bathroom on the floor, all alone. And that one was a really close call because it took like 7 Narcans. It was like really vicious. She lost her short-term memory for a while.
Whoa.
Yeah. So when she got sober, she had 5 years sober. 3 years was out with us in our relationship. And during those 3 years, the world got to see what I always saw. And she impacted a lot of people's lives during those 3 years. And so the first point, recovery's worth it and do it. Because if anything, you give the part of your soul that deserves a chance to be seen, you give that to the world. And so when we had her celebration of life, there were hundreds and hundreds of people that came. And that would have been very different had she died on the Rutter's bathroom. It would have been maybe me and her parents and her brother. But that because she got to show that soul to the world, I was blown away. But I knew that. I knew how much she impacted the world because I saw it. And so it was just really cool to see that on that day, because if it wasn't for recovery, that moment would not have happened, along with the 3 years that we did have. And during those 3 years, I will just say we lived every moment to the fullest. Her favorite quote was from Hunter S. Thompson, "Buy the ticket, take the ride." And we did, like we planned. We traveled all the time. We got away as much as possible. We both worked really, really hard, but we always found time for our relationship. And because we knew what it was like to not have each other, we made it a priority to always have each other, and lift each other up when the other person didn't have the capacity. And so, I did lose her very young. She died in 2021 after 8-month battle with stomach cancer. And so with that being said, she had 0 symptoms before that 8 months started. And it just happened out of nowhere. And so life is short. And if you wouldn't be mad at your partner about this tomorrow, or if, God forbid, they left the house this morning and something happened to them, would that argument matter? Would it matter that they left their damn socks on the floor? Would you give a shit if they were never there again? And I can tell you, probably not, because I left her socks on the floor for about 3 months after, because I wish she was there to leave her socks on the floor. So that is just something I always think is important, is just to look at, what am I arguing about right now? Like what is going on with me that's making me bothered by this moment? And is it going to matter if we don't have each other anymore? And to check in on that, because life is very short and we have no idea what's going to happen from one moment to the next. And you might think that you have forever with that person, but you might not. And so take advantage of each other while you have them. And I like how you shared the story of the woman making the drink. So something that I'm doing is I take her ashes and I travel still. And that was part of my own healing journey, was to not isolate and give up like some of our goals. And so everywhere I travel, I take her ashes, and I have pictures of every single place that I've done her ashes. So her birthday's on the 22nd, and I do something special every year. And this year I got a map, like a photoscape map. And so it has all the different pictures of all the places her ashes are. So my goal was to do the whole United States. So I'm almost halfway there, and then I have like some other countries that I've done as well. But that was just something that she always wanted to do, was to travel. So that's the way I'm kind of bringing her into life still. And I think that's an important part of grief, to keep doing that.
The ritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like for me, I also have a couple. I've only ever really been in very long-term relationships. So my advice is listening makes love so easy and effortless. One person's not more important than the other person. When you start to put the other person's needs above yours and you lose yourself, it's already lost. So I don't know. I just feel when both are seen and heard, it's even the conflicts are nothing. So
No, I think that slowing down, that taking the time and the checking in, like do I care about the socks on the floor? And
Yeah.
I think that comes back to that. I think there are times where we make something much bigger than it is, or we make something much deeper than it could be. And like you left those socks on the floor. So now my assumption is that you don't care about me and you don't respect me and you don't think I matter and you don't think I'm important. And Coral, I think like what's standing out to me about what you said is this to check in and be aware and pay attention to the stories we're telling ourselves about our partner in the moment or the stories we're telling ourselves about our relationship in the moment. And only we really get to write those stories. And yet so often we abdicate the pen to someone else, or we allow our minds to make assumptions and develop beliefs about things that are definitely not true or really inaccurate. And I know that I joked about it, but like my husband will very directly look at me and say, now my youngest does it. Like if I'm upset or cranky, he's like, Mommy, I think you might need a snack. Like everyone knows that I struggle with anger. But I think that it is really because I can spiral pretty quickly, and it's not about the thing that happened. It's about the stories that I'm telling myself about the thing that happened, and then the feelings that I'm feeling about the stories that I'm telling myself about the thing that happened. And sometimes it's not that deep. Like sometimes it just is what it is. And if you could pause and take it at face value, I would often use the joke with my DNA clients, like, don't make a bad day a bad 2 to 4. Like,
Yeah,
keep it
seriously.
just as a bad day. And I think the same can be true for relationships. Like, sometimes you're just hungry and it's not that deep. And don't make it into this like earth shattering battle that's going to go on for 3 weeks because life is short. And I don't know, how much time do you have?
Yeah, and those socks weren't a personal attack against me. She was autistic as fuck. She could, I had to do Post-its to make her turn the damn light off. Like it was the way her brain operated.
Yeah.
She just did certain things that made zero sense to me, but in her brain, they made her so happy. So to your point about like listening and hearing someone, I had to understand that our brains operated different. And like for me, it was common sense to put your socks in the basket right there. But for her, her brain was 75 places. It wasn't on the stupid socks. So, it became funny to me because I'm like, that's why I love her, because she will never remember to ever in her life turn this light off. It's just impossible for her. Yeah.
Another question that we got that I thought was an interesting one, I think this will probably be our last one based on our time. In a world where everything seems accelerated, including love, where everything is short attention spans, 90 Day Fiance, like all those different things, where everything is, we live in a culture of quick fixes and immediate gratification. How do we support younger generations in slowing down and building meaningful connections?
That's a doozy.
That's a really good one.
trends aren't always the right choice.
Yes.
Look at skinny jeans. No, I still like skinny jeans.
They're all skinny now. Like
They're all skinny. Well, no, now they're big.
Yeah, the big flares.
Yes.
Look, they're bringing back juicy suits.
Oh,
Remember, like
no.
early
Oh,
2000s.
God.
it's
Listen,
coming
I'm
back.
not mad at that. That's
No, I
so
got
comfy.
bullied. And now, like, it's like a thing.
Trauma.
Just like the emo phase. Like, I was an emo girl in high school. I had the swoopy hair, the band T-shirts, and my friends and I got made fun of. And now it's cool to be emo. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, I wore like flared leggings the other day, and the backs of them were soaked up to like the above my ankle, and I was like, I remember why I was
remember
so
this.
happy to switch over to non-flares because the Jinkos and the mud jeans with the tears in the back, like this was our life for a very long time. We had to deal with soaked pants. for a very long time, and this is not fun. Why are we going back to this again?
The PTSD war
Yeah.
flashbacks are
Yes.
coming back.
Because I lived in Alaska during this time.
Oh,
There was a lot of wetness on the
Yeah.
ground.
I think that's really hard
Yeah, it is.
because everything is so tied together now. Just
It's
like
everything's a reel.
yeah.
Everything's
Yeah.
20 seconds. 20 seconds, 20 seconds. Go, 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 go. But that's not what relationships really are. They're not 20 seconds.
No, I mean, my rule has always been don't get married in under 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's just based on the neuroscience. And I know I had a client once say like, well, how do you know it's the one? And I was like, has it been 2 years? I was like, then you don't know yet.
Just wait.
You've got to wait. You've got to wait till you're not high anymore. You've got to wait till those chemicals wear off, and you have an opportunity to see what exists in the absence of them. And if you still like each other at year 3, probably it's maybe a good shot of being the one. But I don't know. In a world where everything feels really quick and accelerated and really short term, and there's almost this undercurrent of I should be happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise all the time, and that if I'm not one of those things, something's wrong. I don't know. I guess just sort of embracing the suffer. Like, I think if you love somebody, you will suffer, and that doesn't mean that you're not in love. And it doesn't mean that this relationship isn't worthy of your love. It just means that's an inherent part of the human experience. So
I think it's kind of like going back to like what I teach people in recovery is that, yeah, it's always going to be easier to get that 30-second like thing, like that release of dopamine, like super quick. But we get the best feelings, the best mental health feelings when we work hard towards something and we accomplish it. That's when we get that like high on life feeling. And that goes for relationships too. Like, yeah, we can have these quick little blurts of like relationships, whether it's just like seeing our friend one time in a year, like you were talking about, you know what I mean? Like, but when we invest into it and it's something that we've built, that's where you get that real validation, that real confidence, that real, feeling that nothing else can give you. Even the fake cheap tricks like porn and drugs and alcohol and TikTok.
like the little dopamine hits.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
we're chasing dopamine, but what we should be looking for is oxytocin.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
but we're chasing that dopamine. We want that quick high. We're looking for that PEA. And what we really should be looking for is that more long-term,
Yeah.
lasting connection. Well, thank you all. Thank you for joining me here today. Again, we're here at the How to Be Happy Hour. We accept questions for upcoming pods. Kim at howtobehappyhour.com is the website to submit questions if you are interested. We have a couple upcoming podcasts that I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to talking about the therapeutic relationship from the perspective of the client. So we have quite a few mental health professionals that'll be joining who have also sat on the other side of the couch. And so we're going to come together to chat through those things. We also have one coming up about dating apps. I am so pumped for that one. So pumped to dig into those pieces. We're going to talk about cousins, grandparents, and just all the things. So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.